Uh-oh. Robin DiAngelo, no! What are you doing? Author of White Fragility says people of color need to get away from white people. What? Robin DiAngelo's comments were compared with statements made around the same time by cartoonist Scott Adams. No! Oh, I love it. Now, is the media to come after her and call her a white supremacist, a racist, canceler? No, they're going to prop her up and tell her she was right. So think about the context there. Scott Adams, in a somewhat hyperbolic and ironic fashion, says white people should get away from non-white people. Later comes out and says, of course, he's not saying literally and intentionally, saying if he was basically saying, if you want to implement these policies and this is the message you have, then this is what people should do. They said, oh, how dare you, Scott Adams? Then Robin DiAngelo comes out and goes, yes, he's completely right, but in the other way. And they're like, oh, well, that's totally fine. Robin DiAngelo contrast this. She's saying black people get away from white people, where Scott Adams said white people get away from black people. What's the difference? Who is moving? That's what makes it. None of it's okay, right? To be fair, Scott Adams clarified that he was making a point about their policies, not that he was literally saying white people should flee from non-white people. Advice given to non-white people by the author of White Fragility has underscored the biased perception of the call for segregation based on racial identity. I'm a big believer in affinity space and affinity work, said academic Robin DiAngelo during a webinar on March 1st. People of color need to get away from white people and have some community with each other. Oh, we've gone full circle. And in only like a couple weeks. Amazing. DiAngelo said white people are uncomfortable with anti-racist social justice initiatives. She said willingness to engage in anti-racism training and conversation should be a basic qualification for employment, and that more changes should be implemented in the workplace. In 2023, we have to see the ability to engage in these conversations with some nuance and some skill as a basic qualification. And if you can't do that, you're simply not qualified in today's workplace. One comment on clips of the webinar shared by the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism noted that DiAngelo's comments mirrored those made by cartoonist Scott Adams less than a week before. I love this timeline, man. The creator of Dilbert was denounced as a racist after he advised white people to get the hell away from black people on his online video podcast. Adams was reacting to a Rasmussen poll that found that 26% of black respondents believed it was either not okay to be white, and 21% were not sure if it was okay to be white. Scott said the poll indicated irreparable division between racial groups in America that were likely to further deteriorate. He said, quote, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people, he said in his video. Just get the expletive, the F away. Whatever you have to go, just get away, because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. So I don't think it makes any sense as a white citizen, was it Scott Adams again, of America to try and help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. Yes, it's Scott Adams. There's no longer a rational impulse, so I'm going to back off on being helpful to black America because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Scott Adams later came out. I think he actually came out before this. And he said his point was, and I'm trying to get it right. I could be getting it wrong, but with all these woke policies and people like Robin DiAngelo, no matter what you do, you're called racist. So the only thing you can do, if that's what they want, is to leave. Fine, so be it. If that's the narrative you want to create, well, then fine. This is what people should do. He wasn't saying quite literally for the only reason of race, people should flee. After Adams' comments went viral, his cartoon was dropped by a number of nationwide publishers, including the Boston Globe, the LA Times, and the Washington Post, as well as Gannett Co., which operates the USA Network and 300 local media outlets across 43 states. DiAngelo's comments did not spark the same outrage or have the same professional consequence. Only weeks after the webinar have her comments been noticed and compared to the beliefs of segregationists. Some, like Daryl B. Harrison, has said the author's comments were an indication of her own racist thoughts. Amazing. For people like Robin DiAngelo, it's always other white people who black people need to get away from, said Harrison, the director of digital platforms at Grace to You Ministries. DiAngelo is a woke Bull Connor. Only instead of dogs and fire hoses, she uses the divisive and fascist tenets of critical race theory to keep blacks in their place. DiAngelo has previously argued that white people are racially illiterate and therefore understand only simplistic explanations for racial inequality. If I don't understand racism as a deeply embedded system that I have been shaped by and participate in, my inaction will uphold it, she wrote in a 2018 opinion piece published by NBC News. In other words, as long as whiteness remains unnamed, it will continue to reproduce racial inequality. I think it's funny she's using the word inequality, mind you, because they don't believe in equality anyway. In addition to White Fragility, DiAngelo is the author of Nice Racism, wherein she argues white progressives cause racial harm to people of color, even if they don't intend to. Quote, in the workplace, the classroom, house of worship, gentrifying neighborhoods, and community groups, black people do interact with white progressives. She wrote in an excerpt from her book published in the New Yorker. We are the ones with a smile on our faces who undermine black people daily in ways both harder to identify and easier to deny. She's completely right about that. The deranged, psychopathic, evil person was right. You see, in the end, she said the progressives are causing harms in ways they don't understand. As I believe that's true. They're advocating for segregation. They're advocating for extreme racist policies. Quite literally, the problem. They are making it all worse. And the fact that she can say this with no repercussion, that black people should get away from white people, shows they are deranged and evil. Social zombism. I saw Vivek Ramaswamy made a video explaining what woke is. And I'm just so tired of everyone, what they're doing. You know, I like Vivek. He's a good dude. Going to interview him soon, I hope. And we had him on Timcast IRL before. I think he's fantastic. But everybody trying to identify wokeness keeps hyper-focusing on like a small subset of people, ignoring the bigger picture. So whenever you ask someone, what happens is this, they'll hear a story like that, and they'll say, wokeness is a racial segregationist. And it's like, okay, that's a component of what woke people do. They'll say something like, well, it's rooted in the ideologies of, okay, that is a component. Woke is very simple. It's a cult. Simplest way I can put it. You want to know a little bit more? Okay. Woke refers to, and I've been saying this a lot, but you know, we'll explain more. It refers to the modern left liberal culture rooted in social media algorithms, as evidenced by the fact that she can say these things and face no repercussions. Robin DiAngelo can say effectively what Scott Adams said, and the left does not care. If you were to come to me and say that the ideas are rooted in leftist theories dating back to the Frankfurt School, blah, blah, I'd say no. Because when she says the exact same thing as someone not in the cult, she's fine. Case in point, I can come out and say, war bad, and the cult will say, no, war good. There's nothing leftist about that. There's no ideological root for that. Supporting the war in Ukraine? What does that have to do with race or gender or anything else? But you all know the woke people also happen to be pro-Ukraine war. Why? Was there some Marxist theory where they said in a few decades, in half a century, we should be engaged in a war in Eastern Europe? No, of course not. There's nothing. There's nothing in leftist literature about why we're at war in Ukraine. But the woke people fly the flag. The woke people have Ukraine buttons and lapels and handkerchiefs. Not everyone who does is woke. There are certain GOP people who do. My point is this. If you and a woke person were standing next to each other and you said, tax the rich, they will turn and say, you are trying to appropriate us and steal. Huh? Wait. That's right. When I made a video defending Hassan Piker, they claimed I was trying to buddy up and manipulate them. And I'm just like, it's a cult. The idea didn't matter at all. The idea of what Hassan said and my defense of it was immaterial to the fact that I'm not in the cult. That is what woke is. And I will say it again. If Robin DiAngelo can say effectively the same thing as Scott Adams, and Scott Adams gets in trouble and she doesn't, that tells you what woke is. There's the cult, and anyone outside of it, period. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.